Dust swirled around the weathered porch of the old ranch, settling like forgotten dreams. Silas leaned against the wooden railing, his eyes scanning the horizon, a vast expanse of muted greens and browns. The sun hung low, casting long shadows that danced across the ground, wrapping him in solitude. In the quietness, he felt the weight of his silence pressing against his chest. Lila stood a few steps away, her gaze lost in the wild grasses swaying gently in the breeze. She brushed her fingers through the strands of her tangled hair, the sunlight catching the shimmer of her lost past. Then, unexpectedly, she took a breath, her voice breaking the stillness with an unfamiliar melody. The tune pierced through years of loneliness, resonating deeply with a childhood memory buried in Silas's heart. A song once forgotten, now tethering their fractured worlds together in that sun-drenched moment. The dim light of the makeshift auction house flickered, casting shadows that danced like phantoms across the peeling walls. Lila stood at the front, a fragile figure in a tattered dress, her eyes wide and lost. They seemed to absorb the dimness, pulling it close like a familiar cloak. Her brother had sold her, a transaction conducted as casually as a merchant trading livestock. The muffled murmurs of the bidders faded against the roar of her heart, each pulse echoing her disbelief. She felt a cyclone of emotions swirl within her, but clarity eluded her. Who she had been, or what had led to this moment, was a void that gnawed at her. As men clamored for attention, she caught brief glances of their faces, features rich with greed and lust. One man leaned forward, excitement etched on his rugged countenance, while others grumbled their intentions, their words leaving her feeling more like an object than a human. In that instant, the quiet lonesomeness of her mind became a sanctuary, shielding her from the sharp edges of reality that threatened to carve her identity away. She had no name in this place, no memories to cling to, only the oppressive weight of silence that settled around her like a shroud. Across the room, Silas stood back, a figure at the fringes of the chaos. He was quiet, a cowboy with weathered skin and a contemplative gaze that belied the storm within. His heart was a field of wildflowers hidden beneath layers of hardened earth, each one a seed of past regrets and futures unfulfilled. This was not his life. He had wandered into town looking for work, but as he surveyed the unsettling scene, he felt a tide of unease wash over him. An impulse tugged at him, something raw and instinctual. He wanted to reach out, to pull her away from the monstrous spectacle before them. When the auctioneer's voice rang out, a cruel command echoing against the walls, Silas felt a sharp pang in his chest. Lila's eyes met his across the crowded room, and for a fleeting moment, time fractured. Her uncertainty locked onto his, a haunting reflection of hope mingling with despair. That flicker of connection twisted something deep within him, igniting an ache that felt more profound than any labor he had ever endured. He had come seeking the simplicity of the open road. Instead, he was confronted with a decision that would alter the course of his life. Silas stepped forward, compelled by forces he could hardly name. The bidding began, voices rising in an ugly cacophony. With each price, each raised hand, Lila's heart sank further into the pit of her stomach. She was nothing more than a commodity, a product stripped of identity. He could see the tremor in her hands, the slight quiver of her lip, and it ignited a protectiveness within him that contradicted the quiet he had cultivated for years. He raised his own hand, his voice steady and firm, when he offered a sum that silenced the room. The bidding war ceased, eyes turning with disbelief. Once the deal was struck and Lila was freed from her shackles, the relief felt surreal, like waking from a nightmare. Yet standing beside Silas, the distance between them felt vast. She moved with caution, her mind still shackled by the fog of her past. Who was she, really? Silas glanced at her, searching for the right words, some comfort to bridge the chasm of silence. But how could he give her answers when they were shadows even to him? He was a stranger, a rescuer without a map, and she was a girl with an erased past, both of them navigating a world painted in shades of uncertainty. As they left the auction house, Lila hesitated at the entrance, the sunlight spilling in like golden liquid, illuminating the fragments of her reality. The world was alive with sound, but she felt disembodied, as though she were viewing everything through a veil. Silas moved forward, his strong, steady presence contrasting with her frail uncertainty. He didn't know what she had been through, nor could he fathom the depths of her trauma. He too felt the weight of the moment. A silence wrapped around them both, an unspoken agreement that they were two lonely souls brought together by desperation. In the quiet dust of the street, Lila followed Silas, his boots crunching against the gravel like a metronome of her shifting fate. They passed by the hum of life, yet she remained ensnared within her own thoughts, the past a locked door she could not open. Silas sensed the distance, felt it in the way she carried herself, her eyes drifting away from the present, forever searching in the labyrinth of memories that eluded her. He was filled with questions, but he knew that in this fragile moment, words were nothing but stumbling stones. They would find their way eventually, but for now, silence sang louder than any melody could. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the sprawling fields of the ranch, where a gentle breeze swept through the dry grass, whispering secrets to the evening. Lila stepped off the truck, the dust swirling around her bare feet, and blinked against the golden light. Silas stood a few paces away, his broad shoulders tense beneath the weight of unspoken expectations. The distance between them felt palpable, an invisible barrier forged from silence and uncertainty. As she took her first tentative steps toward the old wooden cabin, Lila felt the chill of the shadows creeping in. She wrapped her arms around herself, fingers brushing against the frayed edges of her dress, a reminder of a world she couldn't quite remember. The cabin loomed before her, its sun-bleached boards and chipped paint echoing the loneliness she had sensed in Silas's eyes. Each creak of the wooden floor underfoot felt like a heartbeat, the only sound in the vast, unyielding landscape. Inside, the faint scent of dust and old leather mingled with the lingering warmth of the day. A solitary table stood in the center of the room, remnants of a meal left uneaten. Lila stepped further, drawn to the faded photographs lining the walls. Faces she couldn't name stared back at her, their smiles frozen in time as if they were waiting for her to remember something lost, a connection, a family, a home. Silas leaned against the doorframe, watching her with a peculiar mix of curiosity and guarded solitude. She turned, catching his gaze, and for a fleeting moment, the world around them blurred into insignificance. Silas's eyes, a deep pool of unresolved emotions, seemed to search hers for something, an understanding, a flicker of recognition. Lila felt the air thickening with questions unasked, and the silence between them grew heavier, like a weight they both carried but dared not acknowledge. She glanced back at the photographs, feeling the ghostly presence of forgotten memories lingering just out of reach. Night descended swiftly, cloaking the ranch in a blanket of stars. Lila found herself standing outside, breathing in the cool night air. The vast expanse of the sky stretched infinitely, stars twinkling like scattered diamonds. She could hear the distant rustle of leaves and the soft calls of night creatures, but the stillness felt oppressive, amplifying the ache of her disorientation. Lila closed her eyes, desperately trying to summon the echoes of her past, but all she found was a void, a silence that mirrored the quietude of the ranch. Silas emerged from the shadows, his footsteps muffled against the earth, and for the first time he spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "The nights can feel lonely here." She nodded, unsure of what to say, her heart beating faster at the intensity of his attention. He stood beside her, staring out into the darkness. In his presence, Lila felt both comforted and unsettled, as if the weight of his own solitude brushed against her soul. As the moon climbed higher, casting silver light over the land, Lila felt the urge to bridge the distance between them. She turned to Silas, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you ever feel like you're waiting for something?" His response was slow, almost hesitant, as if he were wrestling with his own truth. "Yeah, sometimes." The word hung in the air, heavy with the promise of shared burdens. Unfamiliar emotions swirled within her as she contemplated their shared isolation. Lila glanced back at the cabin, and an instinct tugged at her, a song she had never sung but felt resonating deep within her. As her mind grasped for it, her heart began to hum, a melody from a distant childhood she couldn't quite place. With a deep breath, she let the tune flow out, her voice quavering in the stillness, a fragile thread weaving through the night. Silas turned sharply, his eyes wide, the melody capturing his attention like a spark igniting dry tinder. The song wrapped around them, filling the air with a warmth that dispelled the cold, quiet isolation they had both felt since she arrived. With every note, Lila could see the flicker of emotion cross his features, distant memories stirring to life within him, the resonance of a song that had perhaps once echoed through his youth as well. For that moment, they were no longer two solitary figures. They were bound by the fragile thread of music that connected their unseen pasts. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dusty plains as Silas hitched his horse outside the saloon. Lila was already perched on the wooden steps, her fingers dancing over the strings of an old guitar, a bittersweet melody drifting through the stillness of the evening. Silas felt a pang in his chest, a mixture of nostalgia and something else he couldn't name. Each note seemed to circle around him, pulling at the edges of forgotten memories he had tucked away. Her voice, soft yet powerful, echoed in the quiet air, weaving stories of love and loss that held an uncanny familiarity. Silas leaned against the weathered wood of the saloon, captivated as Lila sang, her eyes half closed, lost in the world of her creation. It was a song he knew well, one his mother had sung to him as a child. The realization hit like a cold gust of wind, stirring emotions he had buried so deep they felt almost foreign. He wasn't sure how she had plucked it from the recesses of his mind, but the warmth of her presence was making it difficult to consider the distance he had kept between them. Days turned into a rhythm, each morning a splice of sunlight breaking through the horizon, illuminating their small encampment as Lila prepared breakfast. Silas marveled at her ability to find joy in simple tasks. The way her laughter echoed off the rocks as she stumbled over a stray pot, or the occasional tumble of flour dust on her nose. In these moments, he felt a crack in the wall he had built around his heart. Yet with each shared sunrise, the tender edges of his curiosity began to blur against the backdrop of a gnawing hesitation. He would steal glances at her while they worked the land, their bodies moving in tandem, planting seeds and pulling weeds under the scorching sun. Lila's laughter rang out, pure and inviting, but Silas struggled to allow himself to fully engage. The shadows of their pasts loomed large, a girl with no memories and a man who wore his solitude like a second skin. She often caught him staring, a flicker of something almost like longing in her gaze, but silence stretched between them, thick and unyielding. One evening, as they sat around a crackling fire, the stars punctuating the vast black canvas above them, Silas felt the tension simmering. Lila fiddled with her guitar, her fingers skimming over the strings, quiet and contemplative. He took a deep breath, breaking the fragile spell that had kept them at arm's length. "You sing with such passion. Where did you learn all those songs?" Lila's expression shifted, fleeting uncertainty clouding her features. "I don't really remember," she admitted, her voice nearly swallowed by the crackling flames. "They just come to me like pieces of a puzzle I've never seen." There was a softness to her words that struck Silas with a pang of empathy. He wanted to reach out, soothe the unknowing that surrounded her, but the fear of losing himself in her depths held him back. The questions began to swirl uneasily in his mind. Who was this girl, really? Were her songs echoes of a past life, or mere whispers conjured from the void? The more he observed her, the more he became acutely aware of how little he truly knew. The innocence that lay within her seemed to stir something primal in him, awakening a longing he had tucked away since he found himself wrestling with loss. Their routine became a delicate dance, a mix of shared laughter and flickering glances that slowly began to unravel the fabric of his solitude. Yet, beneath the surface, Silas grappled with an unsettling fear. Each joyous moment was a reminder of the shadow that came with connection, the potential for heartache, for his carefully constructed world to shatter if she ever left or if the darkness of her past caught up with her. Then one fateful night, as the moon hung overhead like a sentinel, Lila began to hum softly, her eyes searching the horizon. The notes danced through the air, wrapping around Silas like a silken thread binding them together. He felt compelled to listen, to lean in closer. With a breath that felt both brave and reckless, he reached for her hand, and as their fingers intertwined, the melody spilled forth. She began to sing, his childhood song again, and the memories surged around him like a tidal wave, mixing their lives like colors on a canvas that hadn't yet revealed its full picture. The light from the setting sun spilled across the dusty floorboards of the small cabin, creating golden patches that flickered as the wind rustled the wildflowers outside. Silas leaned against the frame of the door, his silhouette sharp against the glowing horizon. He watched Lila move restlessly about the space, her fingers trailing over the rough-hewn surfaces, her brow furrowing deeper with each passing moment. It had been weeks since he had brought her to this sanctuary, yet the weight of her lost memories hung between them like a thundercloud, oppressing and unyielding. "Do you ever get tired of the silence?" Lila finally asked, her voice breaking the stillness, a small tremor betraying her bravado. She paused mid-stride, her eyes searching Silas's for something she couldn't quite name, and he felt a shift in the air. It was as if the world had drawn in a breath, waiting for his response. He turned his gaze toward the horizon, momentarily drifting into the distance, where the sky met the land in a blur of colors. Silas shifted uncomfortably, caught between the pressure of her question and the vast ocean of decisions still swirling in his mind. He had learned to cherish silence. It held a comfort that came from years of being alone. But he sensed Lila's need, the way her eyes sparkled with unspent energy, her heart yearning to break free of its chains. "Sometimes," he replied at last, his voice low, "silence is all I want." It was both truth and evasion, a fragile balance he had mastered. The room felt quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet, charged, electric. Lila crossed her arms tightly around herself, a protective gesture that Silas couldn't help but notice. He longed to reach out, to pull her into his world, but a wall of unspoken fears held him back. She was so vibrant and full of possibility, yet she seemed bound by a history she could not recall, leaving her adrift in a storm of uncertainty. "Do you think I'm broken?" Lila asked abruptly. The vulnerability in her tone pierced through the moment like a shard of glass. Silas's heart twisted. He had never considered her that way, but the question hung like a heavy weight. "You're not broken," he said firmly, his throat tightening as if to choke back the fierce emotions threatening to spill over. "You're finding your way." A flicker of hurt crossed her features, quickly masked by a brave attempt at a smile. "Finding my way, huh? Funny, it feels more like I'm losing ground every day." She turned away, her fingers brushing against the wooden shelves, as if seeking comfort in their solidity. Silas could see the frustration pooling in her eyes, the tears she refused to shed. It was a riptide of emotions, and he felt helpless to calm it. "I didn't mean," he started, desperation creeping into his voice, but Lila cut him off, her emotions boiling over. "No, Silas, you don't get it. You brought me here thinking you could fix me, that I'd become the person you could hold on to. But I'm just a girl with no past and a song I can't even remember. I'm not someone you can save." With those words, Silas felt the walls he had built around his own heart crack under the strain. The vulnerability in her voice echoed his own fears, amplifying the loneliness he had accepted in the quiet corners of his life. He stepped closer, closing the distance that had begun to feel insurmountable. "I didn't bring you here to fix you. I brought you here because I wanted to figure out how to be something more than just a quiet cowboy." As he spoke, Lila's facade began to crack, and he saw the glimmer of hope wrapped with despair. "But what if I can't remember who I am?" she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes, threatening to spill over. Silas reached out, daring to brush a trembling tear from her cheek. "Then we'll find out together," he vowed, feeling the weight of her confession weave between them, binding them in a fragile understanding. The world beyond their cabin faded into insignificance, leaving only the two of them standing amidst the ruins of misunderstanding, ready to navigate the uncharted waters of each other's hearts. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting deep shadows across the dusty landscape as Lila stood by the wooden fence, her fingers tracing the jagged edges of the weathered wood. Silas leaned against the post beside her, the evening wind tugging at his shirt, a gentle reminder of the quiet strength that held him together. It was the kind of moment that begged for words, yet they remained unspoken, both of them caught in the swell of uncharted feelings. Silas watched her, the golden light making her hair shimmer like spun silk. Her expression was pensive, lost somewhere between the past she could not remember and the present he had offered her. In a way, he was lost too, a quiet cowboy tethered by unspoken dreams and the weight of his own history. The silence between them stretched out, filled with the unacknowledged longing to bridge the chasm of their separate lives. Lila tilted her head slightly, catching Silas's gaze. She felt a strange pulse of connection, an inexplicable tether pulling her toward him. He felt it too, the invisible line that bound them in this moment. She took a small step closer, her heart racing as if it recognized something about Silas she herself didn't yet understand. The very air around them crackled, laden with anticipation and the bittersweet taste of shared solitude. "I wish I could remember," Lila finally said, her voice soft, almost a whisper, but it echoed in the stillness around them. Silas's heart tightened. He wanted to tell her that memories could be a burden, but he held it back, swallowed by the enormity of her uncertainty. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small, worn harmonica, its surface dulled by years of use, but still holding the warmth of his hands, of his childhood. With a tentative smile, Silas raised it to his lips, the familiar shape molding against him like an old friend. He played the first few notes of a song, the same melody that had once tangled around his childhood dreams and painted the walls of his youth. The sound floated out into the open air, rich and tender, a melody that twined through the silence like smoke. Lila's breath caught as recognition sparked behind her vacant eyes. She could feel the song reaching deep within her, stirring something long buried beneath the fog of her lost memories. Silas glanced at her as he played, his own heart thumping louder with each note. He wasn't just playing for himself. He was singing for her, threading their lives together through music. The melody echoed their unspoken connection, a bridge across the chasm that divided their pasts. Lila's eyes glimmered, and she took another step closer, as if the harmonica's song was pulling her in like gravity. There was an unquantifiable magic in that moment, as if the air itself hummed with possibility. Then she began to hum along, tentatively at first, her voice blending with his in a soft, haunting duet. Silas stopped playing, captivated by the sound of her voice. It was fierce and fragile all at once, like the first bloom of spring against the cold bite of winter. In that instant, the world around them dissolved, and it was just the two of them, surrounded by the fading glow of the sun and the vibrant warmth of a shared song. Silas lowered the harmonica, and a silence enveloped them, teetering on the edge of something vital. Lila looked up at him, her eyes wide and shimmering, filled with a mixture of wonder and fear. "How do you know that song?" she asked, breathless. The question hung in the air, heavy with significance, demanding an answer that could lead them both somewhere new. "I learned it long ago," Silas replied, his voice low and steady. "It reminds me of home." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Maybe it found you too." Lila's gaze softened, an unspoken understanding passing between them, their fragmented lives momentarily entwined in that fleeting exchange. In that shared music, they discovered a glimmer of hope, the possibility of healing, of memory, of something that transcended the loneliness they both carried. As the last echoes of the song faded into the dusk, Silas remembered the warmth of laughter and the fragility of hope. He held out the harmonica, an offering of connection, of trust. Lila hesitated, but stepped forward to take it from him, their fingers brushing briefly, sending a wave of electricity between them. In that instant, she felt something shift within her, a burgeoning sense of belonging, the promise of a new beginning. And for the first time, she didn't feel quite so alone. Lila stood at the edge of the porch, her bare feet brushing against the rough wooden planks, the sun pouring over her in golden rivers. The warm light illuminated the shadows beneath her eyes, remnants of restless nights filled with fleeting dreams that slipped like grains of sand through her fingers. Silas was inside, his voice low and melodic as he worked on his latest project, the soft thud of wood against wood punctuating the silence around her. She could hear it, feel it, but her voice remained locked away, held prisoner by invisible chains. She shifted her weight, glancing over her shoulder toward the open door where Silas moved, unaware of her internal battle. Words teetered on the edge of her tongue, a storm brewing within her, yearning for release. But the past loomed heavy over her, a dense fog she couldn't part. Memories lay scattered like leaves in the wind, and with them, the fear of what might emerge if she dared to speak. Would she sound like a stranger to herself? Would her own voice betray the girl she used to be? Or maybe the girl she never had the chance to become? A flicker of desire sparked inside Lila, igniting something deep within her. She stepped off the porch, her heart drumming a steady rhythm against her ribcage. With each step toward the door, she felt the gravitational pull of Silas's presence. He was patient with her, gentle in a way that soothed the jagged edges of her confusion. Yet, it also terrified her. She could sense the weight of her silence growing heavier, a burden she no longer wanted to carry. She paused, caught between the urge to burst forth and the instinct to retreat. Silas's laughter drifted from inside, a sound so warm and inviting it wrapped around her like a blanket. The melodic notes of a childhood song echoed in her mind, one he had sung to her on more than one occasion. Each time he sang, it was as if a part of her awakened, a hidden thread tethering her to him. But what else would spill forth if she dared to sing along? What truths lay buried beneath the surface of her fractured identity? Silas's voice paused, and in that stillness she felt the world shift. It was as if he sensed her hesitation, a magnetic connection pulling them closer, even from a distance. Lila took a deep breath, the sunlight framing her like a portrait against the darkened doorway. Could this be the moment? The moment where silence transformed into sound, where fear melted into hope. A flicker of determination ignited in her core. She drew in air, feeling the crisp taste of the outside world fill her lungs, and she stepped inside, crossing the threshold between fear and bravery. Silas turned, his expression shifting from surprise to encouragement as he met her gaze, a question hanging in the air between them. In that instant, Lila recalled the haunting melody of the childhood song, the way it felt when he sang it, the warmth of shared moments creeping back into the corners of her mind. "Lila?" Silas's gentle inquiry broke through the fog, and she could see the concern etched on his face, the way his brow furrowed ever so slightly. It was a lifeline, an invitation to bridge the chasm that lay between them. She opened her mouth, the air trembling with anticipation as she willed her voice to rise. For a fleeting moment she hesitated, but the melody swelled within her chest, urging her forward. Silas. The name fell like a whisper, tentative yet full of promise. It felt foreign but right, blooming in the air like wildflowers in spring. It was a shard of herself, re-emerging, and it felt like removing a weight she had carried far too long. A flicker of hope crossed Silas's face, reflecting the shards of sunlight pouring through the window. He took a step toward her, his presence anchoring her. "You can do it, Lila," he encouraged softly, filling the room with his unwavering faith in her. His voice was steady, a balm to her frayed nerves. She concentrated on that warmth, on the eyes that held understanding and patience, and the song came rushing back, the notes intertwining with her resolve. Then she sang, her voice shy but growing stronger with each word. The melody wrapped around them, an intimate embrace that shattered the distance between their hearts. Each note felt like a key, turning in a lock, unlocking parts of her that had long been silenced. She sang as if reclaiming a piece of herself buried deep within, and with every sound echoing off the walls, she felt a transformation wash over her, a promise that her silence didn't define her, but was merely a chapter of a story waiting to unfold. The sun dipped low, casting a warm golden glow over the expansive fields, painting everything in hues of amber and shadow. Silas stood by the old wooden fence, his hands resting on the rough surface, eyes lost somewhere beyond the horizon. Each blade of grass swayed gently with the whispered wind, but Silas felt an unshakable stillness inside him. The air was heavy with the scent of earth and impending change, a palpable tension that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of his heart. Lila sat quietly beneath the giant oak tree, its leaves rustling like 1,000 secrets waiting to be told. The vibrant colors of the setting sun caught her hair, transforming it into a cascade of fire. Silas often stole glances at her, captivated not just by her beauty, but by the mystery that surrounded her. For weeks, he had watched her awaken from the fog of her forgotten past, each day revealing a little more. Yet here they stood, still divided by the chasm of words unspoken. An unbreakable silence lingered between them, and yet each moment felt pregnant with emotions they couldn't express. Gathering the courage that had begun to elude him, Silas cleared his throat, the sound echoing through the quiet expanse. "Lila," he began, his voice low and steady, "there's something I need to tell you." He turned fully to face her, his heart thrumming wildly like a runaway horse. Lila's gaze met his, those deep, soulful eyes reflecting both confusion and an unyielding curiosity. She shifted slightly, the sun casting a halo around her form, and for the first time since she had arrived, Silas felt the weight of his own feelings pressing down on him like the dense summer heat. "I don't know how to begin," he continued, emotions swelling like a rising tide. "You came into my life like a storm, and I thought I was ready for the winds. But truth is, I never knew how much I needed you until you were here." His voice cracked slightly, the vulnerability adding rawness to his words. Lila watched him intently, her expression shifting as she absorbed his confession. Her heart beat in rhythm with his, each pulse echoing the intimacy of the moment they found themselves in, an unexpected closeness amidst years of solitude. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken feelings, and Silas's breath caught as he took a step closer to her. "You may not remember much, Lila, but I want you to know I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." The declaration hung between them, like the smell of rain before a downpour. Lila's heart raced, an ache blossoming in her chest that felt both familiar and foreign. It was as if Silas was pulling back the layers of her memory, unveiling fragments of herself she had long thought lost. Lila blinked rapidly, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Moments shared with Silas flooded back, laughter beneath the stars, the warmth of his presence, the way his smile felt like home. It was all so unsettling yet comforting, and she struggled with the dissonance within her. Then the echo of Silas's childhood song drifted through her mind, a melody she had hummed instinctively but never understood. It surged through her like a wave, stirring up something deep inside. As the lyrics lingered on her lips, Lila found herself standing, her feet moving of their own accord towards Silas. "Silas!" The name burst forth unbidden, heavy with emotion. It shattered the silence like glass, a name intertwined with the essence of everything she had felt but could never name. His eyes widened, and in that instant, the world fell away. The air was electric, both pained and beautiful, crackling with raw emotion as she took in the contours of his face, the depth of his gaze. "Silas," she breathed again, this time with certainty, the name a tether that grounded her in reality. "I remember you." Tears pooled in her eyes as realization washed over her like a cleansing rain. The memories may have been fragmented, but the connection they shared was undeniable. Silas stepped forward, an unbreakable bond forming around them, a promise of past and future intertwined. In that moment, they stood not just as two individuals, but as two souls who had traversed pain and isolation to find each other. His heart soared as he reached out, cupping her face in his calloused hands, the gentleness of the touch igniting a warmth that enveloped them both. "You're home now, Lila," he whispered, his voice trembling with intensity. The sky transitioned from orange to a deep indigo, stars beginning to twinkle, echoing the light that danced in their hearts. They stood together, lost in the gravity of the moment as the world around them faded away, leaving only the two of them bound by the power of a name and the promise of a shared future. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of lavender and gold, as Silas stood by the old wooden fence, fingers tracing the grain of the weathered posts. Lila, barefoot on the dewy grass, walked toward him, her presence a soft whisper in the air. The world around them was hushed, as if nature itself held its breath. She reached for his hand, palm open, and he took it gently, their fingers intertwining like the roots of wildflowers breaking through the earth. In the distance, a lone hawk circled against the fading light, a silhouette against the fiery canvas. The lingering notes of a childhood song fluttered in the breeze, unbidden yet familiar, echoing memories she had yet to reclaim. Lila tilted her head, eyes shimmering with unspoken truths and the weight of loss. She leaned closer, resting her forehead against his, a silent promise forged in the quiet of twilight. The air was thick with unformed words, yet their hearts beat in rhythm, a symphony of understanding that transcended the need for sound. As dusk enveloped them, they stood together, a quiet cowboy and a girl with no past, embracing the fragile beauty of the present where their souls began anew.